Hello. In this step, we are going to look at the unpacking template and identify the key concepts and skills for the beginning process to unpack your CSTA standard. My name is Bridget Castelluccio, and I'm a digital learning consultant for Grantwood AEA. Our first step when we identify the key concepts and skills is to use several supporting documents and websites to get our information. So our first task would be to go to the CSTA K-12 standards website and copy and paste the standard we are going to unpack and place it into the template. Now, it's important to break that down and identify what students need to know and what they need to do. So we will highlight the nouns in blue and the verbs or the skills in green. Next, the CSTA standards have concepts overviews and subconcept overviews. For this, core concepts and core concept practices consist of broad statements which help us to know what learners should know, which are the core concepts, and what they should be able to do in the core practices. So for our next task, we will use the K-12 CS framework, pages 87 through 92 link to find, copy, and paste the concept area overview for the standard that you are working with. And then we will highlight new or unclear vocabulary in yellow. Now, each concept has a subconcept. Within that subconcept, there is an overview as well. It gives us a progression of a thread connecting what students should be learning from grade to grade to eventually understand all of the standards within that discipline. So we will go and use the K-12 CS framework 87 through 92 and look at the subconcept area and highlight, copy and paste back in our template. Again, looking at any new or unclear vocabulary for your understanding and highlighting it in yellow. Within this framework, we will be able to then break down vocabulary and find the learning outcomes for our students as we unpack in the next steps.